This is A Full Reset, the podcast where four women from the ages of none to your business analyze the areas of their lives they'd like a redo and celebrate the lessons learned in their never-ending coming-of-age stories. Now meet the crew. Ms. No One Loved the Metaphor More, Jenny Booth Potter, a.k.a. J Boogie, the Emmy-nominated producer who's always down for a good adventure and a bad idea, Stephanie McBee. She has clean hands and a dirty mouth, Brooke Campbell. And the New York Times best-selling author who's a menace to the public's conscience, Austin Channing Brown. This is A Full Reset.
It's time for a full reset.
Welcome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for the full reset. I am so excited for today's conversation, but first I need to know, how are you ladies doing?
Let's do this. I'm great.
Yeah. Let's get her done.
Yes.
Oh, get her done.
I
Okay.
know. I was feeling a little country, a little rock and roll today.
I mean, we're here
Ooh.
for it. I'm here for it.
I mean, you were just in Texas, so I feel like maybe it kind of like
Okay.
stuck with you.
I think so. I forgot about that. You're right.
Maybe we'll drop some y'alls in and
Oh, I'll feel right at home. Feel right at home.
I love it, y'all.
I would say
I do
Austin does like a
too.
good y'all.
to the topic of the day, which I am personally so excited about because I feel like normally when people talk about this, they keep the conversation really narrow. And I'm excited for us to just like blow it wide open,
Ooh,
And
busted wide
we are-
open. Yes.
bust it wide open.
Bust it.
Have you never heard that phrase? Bust it wide open.
I don't. Well, yeah, but I thought you were making it sexual, and I just
Oh,
felt
oh
really-
yeah, it was sexual.
Yeah, okay.
Always. Always, Jenny.
Yes.
Always.
Well, speaking of sex, we're talking about what I was threatened with as a result of sex my whole childhood, which was parenthood.
What a transition. I love it.
We're talking about getting a fresh start when it comes to parenthood. And we want to make sure that if you are listening and you are not a parent, you stay with us because we're not just talking about me and Austin's experience as moms. We're really trying to talk about the full gamut of parenthood and childhood and roles and all the things. So I'm itching to get started. I'm waiting for Brooke to make more irreverent jokes that I don't get, but you know what? We're gonna
That's what makes this podcast so beautiful.
I learn my little
Jenny learns.
I learn how to be less of a prude, I guess. But anyway, please cut that part out, Christina. I don't want to talk about me being prudish.
Leave it in.
But I leave it in.
Yes.
I would love to open up the floor for the question, when did you know you wanted to become a mom?
Ooh.
Who would like to jump in first?
I'm still not sure. No, kidding. Just kidding.
Yesterday at like 2:00?
Right. I was having some doubts this morning.
Uh-huh. Well, so let's do a quick inventory. So Austin and I have children. Go ahead, Austin.
Yes, I have a child. And I did not grow up imagining that I would be a mom. I was never sure. I was sort of like leaving it open-handed, but I did not have a deep desire for motherhood or for starting a family. I wasn't sure until I was already 30.
Mm.
How did you get sure?
Oh, man. Well, we all have
Voice went up real
counselors,
high.
counselors,
Right.
mentors, pastors in our lives. And, that was a really important part of the story for me. One of the reasons why I didn't want to have kids is because I was really afraid of motherhood. I was raised in with divorced parents, and my mom was actually the one to move out, which was probably still unusual, but was definitely unusual in the early 90s. And so my relationship with her has never been traditional, if you will. Um, and then my stepmom and I struggled a lot as well. We had a pretty like roller coaster of a relationship. And so I was really afraid that um that motherhood for me would look like some of the disappointments that I had and that I wouldn't be a good mother. And there was a pastor in my life who said, Austin, did you she said, "Does your marriage look like your parents' marriage?" I was like, "Oh, no." No, not at all. And she was like, "Girl, motherhood's gonna be the same way. Like, you'll be the mother that you want to be. You are not destined to become what you saw." And that thing set me free. Mm, it set me free. To at least be able to think about whether or not I wanted kids, right? So it wasn't just fear that was making the decision for me. I could finally open and think, "Okay, is this something that I want in my life?" Now, it still took me a few years. I took my time, y'all. I think Tommy and I had been married for 8 years before we decided to have a child.
I'm sure you got lots of unsolicited advice about that. When you gonna have? Oh, y'all need to.
The only person who did not bother me about it at all, funny enough, was my grandmother. My grandmother was like, "You ain't got to have kids."
You're like, "Can you speak up, Grandma? I would like all of the rest of the family to hear this."
So,
Yeah.
Brooke, you have told us about your about your previous 2-year plan to have kids. You talked about this in the career episode. How are you feeling about parenting these days?
It's interesting. I am, obviously I always thought that I would be by now. And yeah, but I mean the older I get, I question like, well, should I just go ahead and, maybe find a splackaveli and just, get I don't know, or something like that, or adopt or whatever, what have you. Oh, a little splackaveli ain't never hurt nobody.
What is a splackaveli? What are you saying right
Um,
now?
Everybody needs that one splackaveli. A brother you can call when her man ain't doing her right. Works it all night to the morning light. Make you feel right, right, right. It's a song.
Okay.
Like a
Thank
one
you.
hit wonder song from maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. Learning.
Very early.
But yeah, but then I question like, is that selfish to like do it alone? And I think that's what I've been struggling with. Like, because I know, obviously I know people that didn't know their father or for whatever reason. And I felt like it starts them off at a deficit. And obviously you can be married for 20 years and then something happened, he leaves or passes and there's no dad. But to start a child off at a deficit is what I question. Like, is that selfish? Just because I know life by itself turns you inside out, and most kids don't, or adults don't show up to the party just screwed up. Like something, either trauma or something turns people's corners. And
Mhm.
so I don't want to help in whatever that is, starting
Yeah,
them off.
I hear you. But I also think that parenthood maybe is selfish. Like, I think, well, let me back up. I think the idea of like the, the heteronormative, like mom plus dad plus 1.7 children or whatever, I think that is BS because I think it also, like, we can't do this alone. Like, you know, I am married to a man and we have 2 children. And I literally was driving home today thinking, thank God for camp counselors. Thank God for school teachers. Thank God for grandparents who help. Like, I was doing my list of people that are doing this with us. I mean, I feel like
Mm.
that cliche quote of the like it takes a village, but it really does. So I don't know if you're looking to us to be your panel of go forth and have a child
And
on your own.
multiply.
But I think inherently, even two people is like not enough to raise kids. Like it really takes so many more people. And I think going into it with that spirit of it's not just up to me, actually is going to be beneficial to your child's experience, that you're not putting so much pressure on yourself to be everything for them, that you're going to be looking for the coaches and the teachers and other people to like speak value into your kid's life. So girl, I say if it's voting time,
What say you?
I wouldn't let that be the reason to stop
Mm.
you. That I think, and I do think it is it's a really hard time to like have kids. Like this world is, I feel like, I don't know. John and I will talk about this all the time. Like, like when we decided to have kids, things seem simpler, and maybe every generation feels that way, but it feels like extra hard right now. I'm like, yeah. So I don't know. I think parenthood is hard no matter how you do it. And if you're doing it alone or with 10 other people, I still think it's a challenge and it's overwhelming. So
That's
I vote do it.
true.
Do this really hard thing.
Brooke,
Plus,
you already know I think of you as my sister wife. And so, all right, come on over, girlfriend. Come on over. Brooke totally just watched my child for like a whole week. And there's no way I could have the life that I do, to Jenny's point, if you all weren't in it.
Mhm.
It makes a world of difference when you all come over and hang out with my baby boy.
No.
We sat down to watch a movie the last time Brooke and Stephanie came over, y'all. And my child was like, "Ooh, Brooklyn, come sit by me." And he totally had an argument with me over whether or not Stephanie was my best friend or his best friend. I mean,
He is my little bestie. I'm
that
sorry.
baby knows he is loved, okay? And he needs every ounce of it.
I love
Steph, what
what
about yeah?
I love what y'all were saying, especially what you just said, Jenny, and Austin, affirming that whole like opening it up to like, no,
Mm.
it's not just the two. It's the like, you hear the whole thing about the village. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village. I've always heard it, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, village, like, okay, village, because I think it sounds good in theory, but yeah, when when it's really time to show up and you're looking for the village, I love that when you do have your people, your friends that you can count on. Like you said, Austin, Brooke showed up and she's staying there and she's watching your son, for a weekend. Like you said, you can't do life without having those people around. It sounds, I think I always imagined that within the frame of, well, yeah, like once you're supposed to do the thing and get married, and then once you have the baby, and then when they have the baby, and then the grandparents will help show up, and then the best friends will be there to help. Blah, 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 blah. But in reality, a bitch is still single, like, like
It's so much more complicated.
you know what I mean? Like, sorry that timetable didn't work out the way y'all thought it would. But so now looking at it, it's like, oh, it's so good to know that that doesn't only work, or the village isn't just applied if this
Right.
process is gone through the way that it's expected to. Because to Brooke's point, like, yeah, I find myself now like, okay, I'm 30 and at this age, I'm like, all right, what is I need to start thinking about what this could look like, because my body at some point is gonna be like, I don't know, girl. So
Fried with cheese and onions. Big.
I'm giving up on you. Mhm.
you say fried eggs, scrambled?
Fried
No,
with
not
cheese.
scrambled.
Scrambled
Fried
with,
with
oh
cheese.
yeah, scrambled with cheese and onions. That's how I like them.
But you get to that place where you're like, can I do this? And you're like, but I really want to, but life and circumstances aren't set up the way I thought, or the picture
Right.
was placed in front of me. So I love what you were saying, Brooke, about like, is it a deficit? And I don't think I ever looked at it as being a deficit. I think because I've seen so many strong, independent women, single women who had to. So it's like, no, I think, and I've seen some couples. I've seen
Hello.
I've seen
Hello.
I seen some kids who had both.
Ain't no guarantees.
Ain't no guarantees. Who had, whether it's mom and the mom, or dad and the dad, or mom and the dad, who had two people in the house, and it's like, you still a little, you still a little. So when I look at that in the full context, it's like, oh, you guys are so right. Like it really doesn't matter how many people are in that household on a day to day. It is who is this child surrounded by, and I think that for me was so. Now being an adult and looking back was so vital because something you said, Austin, earlier about like looking at what motherhood looked like for you, and then you're like, what I want motherhood to look like for me. I love what that person, that minister said over you, like, is that what marriage looks like for you? Because that's been my thing, not in the sense of like my mom, because it's actually was that looking at my mother, I was like, you are for sure Mother Teresa. You are a saint. The weight that this woman has carried on her back with grace and just like dignity, and just from being a pastor's wife to being a full-time, having a full-time job, having multiple part-time jobs,
That's
and
right.
still showing up for like my basketball games and my recitals, and like, and still was coming home and putting a roast in the oven at her lunch break.
And
And
still
then
was
coming,
cute because she always was cute.
Yes, you stay cute.
right?
You stay cute.
How you stay fly? Like how? So the standard and the bar has been very high on what motherhood looked like for me, and I was like, I can't do that shit. That's for the birds. But she never complained, never, like, it was
Yeah.
almost like with like such ease. And of course, you get older, we have these conversations now. She's like, girl, you get
She said, wasn't nothing easy about it.
nothing easy. You get the real deal. But when I look at even just my mom's personality versus my personality, I'm like, I don't even think motherhood would look like that on me. And so then that scares me when I'm like, the characteristics that I have that are of my mom are in certain areas, but like the certain ones that I'm just like, oh, that's so beautiful on you. I ain't got that, mama. So
I so feel you on that, Stephanie. And that is why the village matters so much, because there's no way, like, I highly suggest that Brooke become a mom. I would not be a mom if it wasn't for my partner. Like, there's no way, because I do not wash clothes. I do not wash dishes. I am not responsible for bath time. I just want to be clear.
I was like, wait, is she frozen?
I know. I was like,
I'm pausing for the ...
I was like, that ellipsis is long, child.
etc.
Talk about a pregnant pause on that.
Okay.
One.
Listen. And that's why there had to be a pregnant pause before your girl got pregnant, because I really needed to take inventory of what kind of mother I would be and what kind I would not be, and the ways that I would need my partner and my village to step in if we were going to try this thing. Because very aware of my deficits, and they have proven to be true. Sometimes your friends be like, girl, of course you can do that. You're going to be all right. Listen, know thyself.
Yes.
Know thyself.
Yes. I remember
love
people
that.
saying to me, oh, I got so mad when someone said to me, I remember her face, but I don't remember her name. That's good because I would out her right now if I could. But this nameless face-filled person said to me, well, when the baby gets here, you don't know, you might like want to quit your job. And I remember being like, I will not. Like that was one of the things that I feel really similar to you, Austin, in the ways of wanting to do the inventory and wanting to be really thoughtful. Because this isn't like put it back, return, like exchange.
Return to sender.
This one doesn't fit very well.
A commitment, unlike a commitment that I've ever known. Yes, there is. And it's not like one size fits all. I think we act that way about motherhood. And it's like, this is not just like stretch and go wherever it needs to go. But before my husband and I decided to have kids, there were definitely conversations about do we want to do this? Like, let's make sure we even like cross that very important. Like, do we want this?
Yeah.
As opposed to it just being like the prescripted kind of what
Right.
you were talking about,
Mhm.
Steph, the like you do this and you do this and you do this. Because
Mhm.
we'd already done the like college sweetheart thing.
Mm.
We got married a few years after we graduated. Well, like 5 years after we graduated. So we were like a little bit rebellious in our Christian circle. Um, but and we lived together before marriage. Ooh,
Ooh.
Lord have mercy. That was a fun
I love it.
conversation.
I love it.
My
Yes.
So much for being approved.
I know.
So much for
So
being
much for that.
approved.
We'll show you.
It was so interesting though to be like, oh, we actually have agency over this like next part of our
Mhm.
lives. But it was interesting, like both of us showing up to the table with very different fears around parenthood. And for my husband, it was the fear, kind of what you were speaking to, Austin, of I watched my parents, not necessarily parent, but I watched the stress of life and parenthood on their relationship. And
Mhm.
then that their marriage eventually ended when we were in college. And so he's bringing that to these conversations. And I'm bringing, well, I watched my parents' story around infertility. I know I joked about like, oh, you have sex, you get pregnant. But I feel like I absorbed the message of this could be really hard and this could not happen. So it was like, my clock is ticking. And I was like 30. Like it wasn't really ticking that loudly, but it felt like we got to get on this if we're going to do it. And so it was really helpful to have our counselor in therapy name like these are like unspoken vows that you have both really absorbed, and you need to speak them so that you can like set them free and decide if they're real or not and like put them to
Mhm.
the test. And naming them, I think, frees up it, like what you were talking, it like sets you free, being like it doesn't have to look the way that it did for my parents.
Mhm.
And that is like innate. Like of course we know that, but also you're like, but that's all I've known. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
how do I go at it a different way?
Yeah.
And I feel so grateful, as hard as parenting is because the world feels extra hard. I am grateful for hearing about different ways that people are parenting. Like
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
feels like it's less like what stays in your families, it's like what happens in
Mm.
Vegas, it's like what
Mhm.
happens in like the Potter house stays at the Potter house. It's like, no, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk to my girlfriends about it. I'm going to like listen to parenting experts. There's just so many more resources, and I feel like the shame of needing help and not just
Mhm.
repeating what you saw or what
Yeah.
was modeled for you is is really freeing, because
Yeah.
if I was just modeling exactly what my parents were doing,
Mhm.
there were limitations to what they had access to. And I think they did a great job with the resources available, but let's like get as many resources as we
Yeah,
possibly
absolutely. And I think they
can.
did a good job with the model that they had too, because
Right.
yeah,
Mm.
they had a model, and
Yeah.
I can't speak for everybody, but I feel like it probably got worse as it went back.
I'm sure
So
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, historically speaking, if
yeah,
nothing else, things were pretty rough the more generations you go back,
Yes.
especially in Black households.
right.
Absolutely.
So I think there is definitely something to be said to, as you were talking about, Austin, like so just self awareness and like realizing like okay,
Mhm.
this is my limitation. And also just from like a health standpoint, like energy is super low this way, and I am always exhausted. So I'm like, I just want to make sure too, in doing it now, that I would even have enough to give, energy wise.
Mhm.
Because yeah,
Mhm.
struggle is real just trying to be an adult and
I'm
operate without adding a whole nother human to the equation.
Yeah, I think the tired thing is so real. And, I remember I always, as we talk about like looking to our parents for examples, like I always was like, well, my parents got married at 24, so I should get married at 24. And then I didn't. And then my parents started their family through adoption at age 29. So I was kind of like, all right, that seems like a good age. And then I waited later for that as well. But I think there was like a bit of unconventionality in my parents' journey to parenthood. So they adopted my sister when they were 29. She was a newborn. And then they were told that they couldn't have kids. And my mom like had some health stuff, and so they just we're like, okay, like this is our family. And then was like 5 or 6 months pregnant with me before she found out she was pregnant, which like I remember once I got pregnant, I was like, Mom, how did you go that
It's a
long?
long time.
It's a really long time. But she was 39 when she had me. And then surprise number 2 or 3, however you want to count it, was when my brother was born when they were 43. And I remember when I was younger being like, oh, I really want to make sure that I'm like younger when I have kids because like I don't know why, because it felt like they were older than all my friends'
Mm.
parents. But the older that we all get, I look at them and there's something about, I think, aging later or parenting later in their years that it kept them like with purpose and
Mm.
with like you had to keep up. Like there was like no really other option. And so they're almost 80 and they are doing great. Like they watch our kids like usually like once a week and are keeping up and are mentally sharp and are physically really active. They like use their little Apple watches and go to the track usually like every other day. And I don't want to put all of the the causation of, that effect was like being a parent later in life, but I think it really does help. But I just want to also say that I think it's really important to model to our kids that like we need to care for ourselves. And so
Mm.
I
That
don't
part.
know, like Austin, like I know you are such a proponent of taking naps. And like I think
Girl,
that's
we
so
take naps together. When it's
I know.
when it's the baby's nap
Mm.
time, it's my nap time.
Right.
We come on.
Right.
Chill.
But I think that's so
Every
important.
Saturday and Sunday, it's nap time. Let's go. Get in this
Right.
bed.
But I think that's so important to model that like we have needs too. We need to rest.
Mm.
We need to lie down. We want to work. We want to have purpose. We want to have passion. We have friends outside of them. So I think if you're tired and you're a parent, you say, kid, I'm tired. I'm going to go lie down and you're going to entertain yourself for a little bit and you're going to be okay. And we're all going to be okay. And this world does not actually revolve around you. And let me model that by my actions. So Brooke, I would just say, I would just encourage you, be like Ed and Becky, just channel your
Who
inner
are
Ed
Ed and
and
Becky?
Becky.
Who?
My
Her
parents.
parents.
Oh.
Took me a second too, y'all.
I don't know that you've ever said
You
their
never said
names.
their names.
Yeah.
I was
Well,
like,
now I
who?
have.
See, that's why I wanted you to mention your parents' story because I'm sorry, that touched me when you shared that before
Mm,
the show because I was just like, because I do go back and forth in my mind about like, do I want kids? Am I made for kids? Like I think when I was younger, it was this assumption. It was like you just yeah, of course I'm gonna have kids one day. I didn't really look at it in the context of like, do I want kids? Like
right.
I don't think I ever asked myself that question. It was just like, oh, this is what we do.
Yeah.
This is
Right.
what
Right.
comes next. And the older I get, I'm like, oh no, I'm asking myself that question. And currently the answer is I want my parents to have grandkids. That's
Wow.
where my mind
Mm.
goes. That it's there's a genuine I want to see you have grandkids. I want you to have that
Mm,
experience. And I
Yeah.
still question like, do I want how to
Right.
like
Which is not
seeing
the
my
same thing.
it is not the same thing. And I'm torn between that. I guess I'm gonna throw this question back out there because I'm in a tug of war with the whole wanting them to have grandkids. I know they say like
mm,
you're never ready. Like at least I hear all the time, like you're never ready to be a mom. It just like you just jump in and you figure it out or whatever.
mhm,
But there is this, I think, tug of war with me in like understanding like identity of my
mm,
identity as Stephanie, as I am this carefree, just living my best single life. And in my mind, I always saw like, of course, I'm gonna get the job and I'll travel a lot, but I'll have the
mhm,
kids and we'll do. But it never made sense, like how, like what that really looks like. But now I'm
Mm.
like, oh, my identity will change, and yeah, what does that look like? So how do you guys balance your identity as being Jenny, Austin, and even Brooke? I don't know if you think about this as well, like
mm,
balancing. Because I know that you've wanted motherhood as well. So like,
mhm.
does it all just become one? And it is like, I know, like real quick. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but it makes me think of my mom saying like, once she had kids, she became Charles and Stephanie's mom.
Mm.
And I remember her saying that, and not in a bad way, but she just was
Totally.
like, no, like people stopped seeing me as Terry, and it was like, oh, that's Charles and Stephanie's mom, and I'm like, oh, that's terrible.
My dad says it still happens to him. He'll be in the bank
Yeah,
and somebody will be like, "Oh, are you Austin's dad?"
yeah,
Mm.
And you're like,
exactly,
"Man, once upon a time I had a name."
right, exactly. So like,
Hmm.
how do you I guess reconcile that, like
Mhm.
not lose yourself in motherhood?
I will say though, I mean, obviously I don't have kids, but I will say that is one benefit or thing that I am happy
Mhm.
about as far as why I didn't have them when I planned to have 'em. Like, with my whole little plan, because I feel like that absolutely would have been the
Mm.
case. Like, I
Mm,
literally would
Mm.
have existed to manage this family, to, be a mother and a wife. And I feel like
Mhm.
getting older allowed me to kind of come into myself and like discover more of who I am, what I want. Like it gave me a
Mm.
chance to kind of and a lot of this is more recent, like during COVID, like to
Mm.
actually revolt against some stuff and ask some questions of like, well,
Mm.
why do you believe this or why do you want that? And so I think that is one positive to, at least for
mm,
me, waiting a little longer because I was able to get to a point to even identify. So I guess to answer your question, I think
Mhm.
before you can have that autonomy of
Mm.
me, you have to discover me first. And
mm.
so I think
Whew.
yeah,
Ooh,
I
write
think
that
you just
down. Before you have the autonomy of say that again, Brooke,
before
please.
you have the autonomy of me, you have to discover me. And so I think if I did have kids at this point, I would be able to, I don't want to say keep myself separate, but be myself and honestly impart more of them into themselves, because I think how I would have mothered would have definitely been very, very
Mm,
by the book, very, it would have been very
Mm.
Christian. It would have been very, what I saw. But
mhm,
now it's more like
Mm.
I'm not trying to. I heard this TED talk and it was so good. I can't remember her name, but basically she was saying that most parenting is about trying to raise your kids to fit inside the world
Mm.
instead
Mhm.
of teach them how to take up space in the world. And
Wow.
so I feel like
mm,
I am at that point to where I'm like, no,
Yeah.
like, you know, be all of you and, just be able to impart more of them into themselves. And so I think in that
Mm.
I can only do that because I can do that with myself at this point. More so. It's still a work in progress, but
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Brooke. Sometimes I complain and think, "Man, I should have done this when I was younger." I should have
Right.
been like my mother and done this at 27 or, however old she
Mhm.
was. She was definitely in her 20s. But then I think I was a mess. Like, I was still such a mess. I
same.
was still working through, I was
Right.
still trying to figure out career stuff. I was still working through childhood traumas. I was still,
Mm,
my baby boy is growing up with a much healthier person.
Mm,
And that is because, like Brooke is saying, I already know who I am. I already
Mhm.
have a career. I'm already known for other things
mhm,
than having a child. And so being his mom is now a bonus
mm.
instead of a
Yes.
subtraction, right? It just
Ooh.
became something that got added to my life because my life was already full,
Yeah.
I already had
Yes.
my plate. And I want to say, Steph, is that I always get nervous when I talk about my husband because I feel like my feminist card is going to be revoked at any moment. Not because obviously for those listening, I do believe in women's equality, but I
To
feel like
be
there's
clear. To be clear.
just to be clear, but I do feel like we can that the independent woman sometimes asks us to deny the love that we may feel for, in my case, a man, right? And
Hmm.
so I swear this is going somewhere. I
I trust you.
when I first started thinking about having a kid or kids, my first thought was how cute it would be to have a little version of my husband. That was how I began to fall in love with this little
Mm.
mm,
person before this little person even existed. but it was allowing myself, instead of to feel fear, which is what I felt
Mhm.
all the time, right? It was I allowed myself to imagine and dream what it might be like, and do I want that? Does
Yeah.
that sound like an addition to
Mm.
my life? Is that something I want to do? Do I want to potentially chase a little boy around a backyard with my do I want to take a little boy to the zoo? Do I want to, like being able to dream
Mhm.
about how good it could be
Mm.
was the door that I needed to then be like, "Oh my gosh, actually I think maybe I do want to do this." So I
Yeah.
don't want to discourage you from thinking about your grandparents, that your parents becoming grandparents,
Mhm.
because that might be the door that allows you to just dream about it. And at
Mhm.
the end you might be like, "You know what? I think I would want to leave them with the grandparents." And that, then you probably shouldn't do it. Right?
Like Simba, just like Simba all over again.
I wanna take him home. Okay, well, maybe we won't do that. You just come over and help me with mine, you know? But it could be the open door that allows you to dream about what it might be like to
Mhm.
have a child and to expand the family for everyone, because that is what you're doing. You're expanding the family for everybody.
My favorite way to make a decision is to pretend that I've made the decision and live in that reality for a length of time. So 20 we're considering moving. And so we did a thing last summer, let's just pretend. It wasn't even last summer. What is time? It was 2 months ago.
Oh
Um
my
where I was like, okay, for the next 24 hours, we're not moving this year. Like
Mhm.
and I just lived in that reality,
Mm.
and I dreamt about different things. I have a book coming out. I was dreaming about this book launch and all these things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do well in this season. I thought about summer at home with my kids. I thought about this company. I thought about this, I thought about all these things. And then the time for the next 24 hours to come started, and I said, John, I don't even want to live in the reality that the pretend reality that we're moving in a few months.
Mm.
I can't even do it for 24 hours. And to me, that it was a really, yeah, that was well, yeah, if you don't even want to pretend
Right.
live in this reality for 24 hours, then let's not make that our actual reality.
Yeah.
Mm.
But I think oh man, I just co-sign everything Brooke said, co-sign everything Austin just said, because I think there is such a weird and patriarchal script that we're handed as women, that this is going to be not only what you do with your life, but this is going to give your life meaning. It's going to fulfill you in ways that nothing else will be able to. And that just starts you off with so much pressure if you do pursue motherhood. Um, and I feel so grateful that I felt when I was in my 20s, I was still cleaving. I had left the home, but I was still cleaving from things that had stayed with me. And I just, yeah, I think in some ways I actually ran away from motherhood, even that identity as being a mom, even after I became one, because I was so fearful of it becoming, oh, I'm only my kid's
Mm.
mom. And so I remember when I was on maternity leave, I'm in my counselor's office with my newborn. I think he was 3 weeks old. And I can't, did I share this story on the career episode? I don't remember, but I'm rocking him in his little car seat. And all I'm talking about is work.
Oh,
All
you
I'm
did.
talking
Yeah.
about is, are they going to replace me with someone else who's taking my maternity leave job? And my counselor is can I just bring you back to this moment? And can you just look at your son? And I looked at him and I started crying, and oh my gosh, this whole point is for me to physically heal. This maternity leave is for me to physically heal, but
Right.
also for me to embrace this new facet of my identity. It doesn't need to be all of me, but it's going to be some of me. And
Yeah.
I think there's I love just everything you were just saying, Austin, that this is an addition to my life, that and I think it's really important for my kids to see that they are an addition to my life. They are not my whole life. I am raising two white males that, as far as I know, are straight. So they are already set up, and I'm like, I want to, how do I like knock you down, knock you down a few, but just to not have the whole world already revolve around you means
Mhm.
my whole world can't revolve around you. Like
Mhm.
that's gonna come from here, and you're gonna not have some mom that's gonna like fight heaven and earth for you. Like you're gonna have to figure out how to take up your space in a way that is healthy and not in the
Mm,
way that society is telling you to take
Mm.
up your space. But I do think for so many women, I'm an extremist maybe, where I'm like, great, so if my whole identity isn't motherhood, then my whole identity will be something else. And it's like, well, that's not really, I'm a Libra, I'm all about balance. So I'm like, well, let's like figure, like, let's like, how do we embrace all of these facets of ourselves,
Yeah.
and in some circles be okay that nobody knows my first name. They don't know that I have like all these ambitions. They just know me as my kid's mom, and to not be like horrified at that. And then
Mhm.
in other areas for people to be like, wait, you have kids? Like
I love
that
that.
full life to me. But
Mhm.
man, it's hard. It's like going off script. It's going off the script we were all handed, that you're either going to be a career woman or you're going to be a mom, or, and it's like, how do we do all of it and not lose ourselves? Like, it's hard. It's hard to do that.
Steph, do you feel like you're being pressured?
When you hear like, can women have it all? That's what you were just saying
Mm.
was what it was
Mm-hmm.
reminding me of, the whole like, can we have it all? And I always hate that. I hate the question. I hate that it is a question. I hate that because nobody's asking a man, can he have it all? Like,
No.
Well,
Nobody.
right. So I hate it when it's, and then it starts to funnel into the, well, we can, just not all at the same time. And it's like,
Right.
if you
Seasons.
strategize, yeah, there's a season for this, and if you strategize and find your balance, I'm like, I just want to be like, fuck you, all of y'all. Just, am I feeling pressured? That is a really good question. I feel like saying yes and no. I
Hmm.
think it's more of an internal pressure than it is actually from people
Mm.
asking me.
Mhm.
Um, but so I went to a wedding this weekend, and it was I think because of the nature of who I am, probably my personality, no one's really coming out and asking me, Stephanie, why you ain't got no kids yet? Like, that's not
Right.
happening. You ain't
Right.
talking to me like that. Like, we not having that conversation. Probably the only person who would have done that would have been like my great grandmother, who would have actually been like,
Sure.
baby.
And they not afraid to ask nothing.
They ain't afraid to
Mhm.
ask nothing and like humble you real quick. But while at this wedding, I mean, I kid you not, at the daggone reception, like the vows were just taken, the kiss was just had, they were just pronounced man and wife. We go to the dinner, we're all like, oh, toast, toast, toast. And during the toast, the mother gets up and she's like, so I can't wait for these grandkids. It was like
Oh my gosh.
they they just like the ink ain't dry on the
Right.
on the license.
They
And
You
haven't
ain't
eaten
then
even
their
got to the
cake.
wedding night, huh?
Right.
I didn't even get to the wedding night. It was like, oh my goodness. And
The
then
garter is still
it's
on.
still on. Like, what is happening? Like, so I could see it. That's the type of, like, of course, culturally, like I've grown up
Mhm.
around that.
Right.
And
Right.
so the bride and groom, they're younger than me. So it's like, of course, I got the looks like, so is there anyone special in your life? And I could tell it's leading there,
Mhm.
but it never came up. And so my mom,
Hmm.
she won't pressure me. She'll just be like, she'll talk about the puppy that I have. Like, this my
Oh, that's
grandpup.
Simba. I said the name earlier. That's Simba, folks.
Yes, Simba.
Yes.
Simba. I'm like, Simba's your surrogate grandchild right now. Like, chill out. My dad doesn't say anything. But there is this kind of like, you feel the elephant is in the room. Just ain't nobody
Right.
saying anything about it. And I think that's where I then start to internalize it. And so the questions come in my head and the pressure is on of like, all right, y'all getting up there in age, and I'm getting up there in age. And all right, it's okay. And little comments will be made about,
Yeah.
how did my mom say it the other day? She said, oh, she joke like my mom's not a big jokester. Like she doesn't. By that I mean like she doesn't tell jokes. So when she
Right.
does, it's like, oh, you got something to say.
All right.
And
Passive
she,
aggressive,
What's on
maybe.
your mind?
yeah, yeah, and she's not even a passive aggressive lady.
Right.
So that's why when she makes the joke, it's like, you low key coming for me, like
Mm-hmm.
that shade under that tree,
Right.
mom.
Subtweet me, mom.
Is the real.
Did not just create your own
Like
shade.
the whole. Like so she said something like, well, by the time she told somebody,
Oh no.
yeah, it was at this wedding thing. She says, yeah, sometimes Stephanie will say, because we had, the kids at the church call me Nana, and so since all the kids at the church called me Nana, my kids growing up calling my grandmother, Granny Gran, they called their grandmother Granny. And so they look at me and say, well, Mom, what are our kids gonna call you? And I said, well, shoot, at the rate y'all going, by the time y'all have kids, I'ma be Granny Gran. I won't be anybody's great grandmother, but I'll be called Granny Gran. I was just like,
You've been thinking about this, mama.
been on your you've been sitting with this on your heart for a minute, huh?
Follow up.
About
You have a brother. Is he being asked any of the is there any pressure on him?
No.
Oh Lord. No, I knew it.
No, it's not. I mean, no one. It's like, oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because it's not this, like, my mom for sure will be like, yeah, so losing your life, because she
Mhm.
is kind of like the same with the both of us.
Okay.
Mhm.
But for like,
She's a feminist.
she is
Just
a
kidding.
feminist. To be clear,
I'm just
my mom is
kidding.
down with the cause. But like my aunts or my grandmother, like those extended family members, oh my goodness, he is the prince. He can go live his life. He can live his best life. And Charles is pursuing his career. He's building an empire. He is, he's doing he's doing all the. I want to be like, I'm building an empire too. Don't you-
Right.
Wait a minute.
Are we all?
Wait, we all building an empire. But to your point, Jenny, like, no, he's not asked. It's like, oh, he'll get to it. He has time. He'll get to it.
Right. This is okay. I want to just observe something. I feel like what Austin was describing about it being like a bonus to her life with becoming a parent is how men are approached with parenthood. That their life is
Ooh,
already
yes.
full. And so it will be a
Yes.
bonus. And women are already at a deficit. And so we need to become a parent
Ooh.
to fulfill our destiny, to be full, to fulfill our purpose, basically. And that is so messed up. And I think it's really pervasive.
Yeah, I think that's true though. I never thought about
Yeah.
it like that, but I think that you're 100% right.
I was talking to my dad, because our lives are all intertwined. But my dad and Stephanie's dad were really close. And I was sitting and talking to my dad the other day. Like, he's really proud of how they raised us and who we've become, and us, our siblings, our whole like sort of church group that we grew up with. And my dad said, but sometimes I wonder if maybe we went a little hard on the you can do anything. And maybe we should have been a little more specific about the family part.
Wow.
Because y'all doing great in the career, but everybody seems to be taking their time when it comes to the family part. I was
Well,
like, well, Dad, I don't think you're telling any lies, because
listen,
we heard a whole lot about careers and doing what we do and going far. And would you agree, Steph?
absolutely, 100%. I would want to sit down with your dad. I might go over there today because
Do it. He'd love it.
Oh my gosh. Please record this.
be like, we need to talk. It's been a minute. Let me catch you up. So, but no, like, I think that's so real in what he said. Like, it was like poured into us about being successful and living our dreams. Like, not even just like get a job or get a good job. And no, it was like living your dreams. Like, sky's the limit. You can do anything. what do you want to learn how to do? Like,
Right.
my dad took Austin's brother, and some others from the church down to the university when we were like in high school
Mm-hmm.
to basically take a university course on learning how to build a website. And this was like when websites were
Wow.
like first being like
Listen,
That's so
introduced.
cool.
we barely had an email address for school at that point.
Right.
Like we had one, but nobody used it.
Facebook was not around. Let's put it in
Right,
that
Right.
perspective.
Pre-Facebook.
There
No, this
was
is
no,
pre-Facebook.
yeah.
Yes.
We're like learning to build a website. Like that's
Name
what
a
we were
year,
getting
Steph. Just name a year. What year was this?
2000.
Y2K?
Maybe like 2000, 2001.
All right.
Something like that.
Yeah, because we were in high school. So yeah, 2000,
Mhm.
2001.
Google had been invented, I think, 3 years before that.
There you go.
I just did a 90s trivia game, and I
She's so proud of herself with that one.
I was like,
That's
it's 1990.
impressive. I have no idea when Google was created.
I know, I
Okay.
guessed it incorrectly.
Okay.
It was 90. I guessed 95, and it was. Okay, now I have to hold on. We got to fact check
Oh
this.
my
I'll
gosh.
be back.
While you go fact check, I'll continue the story. So yes, they poured like all of that into us about like being successful and all of those things. But I feel like and this could be me speculating,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
there wasn't so much of a pouring into when it came to like family, because I don't think they knew how, because they were
Wow.
still undoing, unlearning
Ooh,
from their own.
Steph.
I'm about to turn my camera off.
I'm playing with the cord to my microphone.
Uh-huh.
Woo!
Because when
Sweating.
you said that, I was like, oh, don't get me started, because I do feel like, again, when you're a kid and you're watching, like, this don't make sense. I don't understand.
Right.
Like, I feel like, but then when you become an adult and you start to see your parents for the
Yep.
adults that they are and were at the time they were raising you, it's like, oh,
Yep.
I'm seeing some little bit of trauma. I'm seeing some
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm seeing some healing that needs to take place here. I'm seeing
Yep.
some unresolved issues over here. Oh, now I'm seeing some moments where we didn't see eye to eye,
Yep.
and it wasn't personal. It had
Yep.
nothing to do with me.
Right.
That was all you. Oh, so even though I grew up internalizing that as me being a
Oof.
bad kid or me not doing whatever I could as a kid
Woo!
I was supposed to be, wait, you as the parent were trying to just figure that shit out because
Mhm.
Mhm.
you had issues with your parents that
Right.
you're still trying to reconcile with. And
Right.
so then there's that trickle down effect. And so I really feel like, although these conversations weren't had at the time, I'd be willing to bet that there was this, I'm going to pour into you so you could be so successful over here. I don't know how to address that over there.
Right.
I don't quite know yet how to um give you everything that you need over there, because I don't feel like I've gotten even everything I need. I may be
Mhm.
a grown man now, but there's that little boy still inside of me
Mhm.
that is still hurting from some of the things that I went
Mm.
through as a child. And,
Yep.
so I don't know how to give that to you as a parent. And I do feel like there's a lot of us in that generation is kind of like noted.
Right.
So
Yep.
until I figure out how to fill in those gaps or how to make
Yep.
sense
Mm.
of it, my attention is going to be on the career,
Right.
and so now I find myself actively healing in areas
Yep.
that I'm like, oh, this is why I'm so afraid to become a parent right now. This is why I'm so
Yep.
afraid of
Wow.
motherhood, because I don't want to do some of the things that I saw or learned or
Yes.
Mm.
interpreted. I refuse to pour that into my kid
That's right.
or the next
Yes.
generation. Like, when we talk about generational curses and like breaking some
Mm.
generational things, like, I know my mom was very intentional about that. Like, she would see things that
Mm.
happened in her family and she's like, I refuse to pass that to you.
Yeah.
I am
Wow.
breaking
Woo.
that here and now. And
Yes.
Amen.
so
Let it be so.
right? And I'm finding myself saying,
Yep.
I refuse to pass this on to my
Yep.
kids. I am breaking it
Mm.
here and now. And going back to what you said, Brooke, earlier about the autonomy in me and
Mm.
then
Mhm.
discovering me, I'm like, yep, I am taking this time to discover me in all
Yeah.
of my spaces, in all of the areas of me that are unhealed, that are broken, that are
Mm.
whatever needs to be to have that attention given to it. The parts of me that I didn't know wasn't getting love but needs to be loved,
Mhm.
let me do that
Mm.
now, so that way I
Mm.
can pass that on. So I think that's also why, going back to what you said, that pressure is like, yeah, there's the pressure of timing and I want to do that, but then there's this
Mhm.
pressure of kind of I want to get it right, and I don't want to
Yeah.
mess it up.
Totally.
Literally the
Totally.
best parent advice that we got. We did like a I don't know what we were doing. We like did our rounds. We had like 3 couples that we were like, "We think you are not totally like messing up your kids. We would love to interview you." We like invited ourselves over for dinner to these 3 different couples, and one couple said to us, and I will never forget this. They said, "Make sure your kids end up in therapy, but for different reasons than why you're there."
Mm. Ooh.
Like, you're
My
gonna mess
child
up
So
told
your
me that
honest.
all the
right?
time. They
That's
do.
so
I tell her all the
honest.
time. It's gonna
We're
be for
gonna
different reasons.
we're gonna mess them up. That's
Mhm.
just a
Yep.
given. But
Yep.
make sure it's not stuff that you didn't heal from that
Yeah.
you
Mm.
now just pass on. Like, hello, somebody I'm like, that maybe was my moment that you had, Austin, with your like
Mm.
where I was like,
Now
"Oh,
I'm sure.
I'm not
Uh-huh.
gonna do this." It was this permission, like, there's no way I'm gonna do this where they aren't messed up in some way. And like I can do because
Yeah,
it's just
everything right.
human. Like we have trauma from different things that are outside of our family. Like there's just living life is
Life is
unexpected.
hard.
And yeah,
Yes.
life, yes, yes. Chapter, book title, all, yes, like we could write a whole novella about this.
Mhm.
Um, but to equip them with tools of here's how you deal with how life is hard, not just here's all the ways that I didn't take care of it and now I'm just
Mm.
passing more.
No, but I think that's the reset that is like transparency. I remember like distinctly when I recognized that and obviously I was an adult, but that my parents were just like broken kids and they just happen to be adults. Like,
Right.
that they carry that
Mhm.
stuff and it took them off the pedestal, not in a negative way, but in a way that I think probably a lot of people are raised that there's no transparency there, and Jenny
Mhm.
kind of spoke to that where it's they're almost not human or they're not
Mhm.
tired or they're not, and so I think it's about and I think how at least for myself how the reset that I would want to do is I wish that there was more transparency.
Mm.
And I want to be transparent with, the things that, and not obviously, I'm not going to be like, hey, kids, I only got $2 in my bank account. Like, not that type of transparency, but just,
I'm feeling real horny, kids.
Hey.
why don't you guys turn the TV up pretty loud? But and that they're human. We're human, that we're all trying to, just kind of make it through. And, yeah, and I feel like that it helps a child realize that they don't have some incredible, unattainable goal to try to reach as a person or as a parent or that we're not perfect. And
Right.
so I think that's the reset for me, just listening to you guys that I want to be transparent. I want to be healed. I want to be
Same.
yeah, and I want them to
Mm.
be along the process with me to
That's
know that,
Mhm.
right.
that they can do it too. And yeah, that we don't have to just be mannequins.
Mm.
Same. I love that. That speaks to me too, Brooke. I want that same transparency. Um, well, ladies, one of my favorite parts of this podcast is when we take it to the streets. When we invite our friends into the conversation, because I love this reassurance that we're not alone in this.
Here, here.
That is, you know what I mean? Where it's like sometimes you can feel like, oh, is this just happening in my head? Am I the only
Yes.
one that feels this way? So I love when we can come together and we reaffirm each other, but then also it's not just us, but
Mhm.
others are saying that they have some things that they would redo when it comes to parenting.
Mm.
So on social media, on our Instagram account, we have someone by the name of Thad Cummings who left a comment on our post about this. And he says, choosing work over time with my daughter. is what he
Mhm.
would like to get a redo on when it comes to
Mm.
parenting. He said, I miss much
Mm.
of her first 2 years of life with a little sad
Mm.
face.
Mm.
Oh,
I
I just
know. Yeah.
transported to my counselor's office where I'm like, I'm so grateful that I got like a redirect in that moment of like, hold up.
Mm.
Like let's embrace the season that you're in. Oh, I said the season word. Is that gonna make you mad, Stephanie? Um
It's okay. It's okay. I'll let
but
it slide.
okay, great. But I do. I think, there's this like expression like the days are long but the years are short. Like those early days of parenting, they feel like they're going to last forever. And this is my like very silly like parenting like do-over, but like I wish that I would have taken like more video and more like pictures of my kids when they were little, cuz it really does go by quick, but when you're in it, it is slow as molasses. And so it does feel like, oh, I can do all the things, cuz and then you look back and you're like, that was I'll never get that time with that kid at that age again.
Mm.
And you don't want to live with like this regret, but it is hopefully a redirect for the future of like, how do I be present today? How do I
Mhm.
delight when my kid walks into a room and let
Mm.
them know that their presence matters? Um, yeah.
I
So
Mm.
wish
I definitely resonate with that.
I wish we had much longer maternity and paternity leave
Yes.
in like in real ways, right?
Yes.
Not like, sure, you can be gone, but your job might not be here when you get back.
Right.
You
But
know,
you're
but like
paranoid that
for
you're being
real,
replaced the whole time.
right?
Right.
Exactly. Like an actual, for real, understood by everyone leave so that you could actually enjoy your child's first year without being afraid that your career will be penalized for it.
And I was doing research on this, and maternal like parenting discrimination is the fastest growing like caseload of discrimination that is happening in the workforce. And I'm sure
Really?
it's yeah, I mean people will fire you if they find out you're pregnant, especially if it's like an hourly job or like not salaried where you're likely not able to have access to like legal ramifications. It
Wow.
is so the needing to like I actually appreciate that we heard from you said that was a man that commented,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Mhm.
like, Lord, if he's feeling it, like as a working dad, working moms are already, it's like, ooh, exactly what that person said to me, where it's like, well, I'm sure when the baby comes, you're probably going to consider like either moving down to part time or quitting
Right.
altogether. There's
Mm.
this assumption that so it's you're almost like having to like be like, see, no, I'm gonna be employee of the year. Like I'm gonna show them I'm so devoted to this. And it's so pervasive, and it's like it has real effects on your livelihood. This isn't
Mm.
just like, oh, who do I love more? It's like, no, like if I love my child, I have to like nourish them and like provide, all these things for them. Babies are expensive. We all know how much babies cost. They're not free.
Lord. Oh
That
Lord.
hospital bill alone. Good Lord.
Mm. Y'all gonna have to start a GoFundMe when I have my baby. Yeah. GoFundMe for the baby. We have another comment on the socials. And Jenny, this is Mama Run Amok. Mama Run
Oh.
Amok. Said something in relation to what you just said about like taking pictures and stuff and being in the moment.
Oh.
So she says the superficial regret or do-over would be yes, her superficial regret is not doing professional photos of the family. But she
Mm.
says her real regret is spending too much time in particularly white evangelical circles when they were little.
Woo!
I was like, "Oh, right. Mama Run Amok is.
She
Whew.
running. She running. Run! Run!
Have your kids in therapy for
Run from
different
those
reasons than
circles.
you were.
Run like the wind.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh.
we talk about village, but what village you choose matters,
Ooh. Ooh.
Mm,
you know?
mm. That part right there. That part right there. I could not imagine growing up without the village of your father, Austin, in my
Mm.
life.
Same,
So that's for
same.
sure very real. Very, very real. Well, to the listeners, this is for the listeners. Listen, what do you want to control, alt, delete We want to hear from you. Make sure to go to our social media. Go to Herself Media on Instagram. You'll see the link in the bio. Click that link. Let us know what are some things that you would like to control, alt, delete, get a redo on in your life.
Ladies, this was an amazing session. Thank you for your
So
time and
good.
your energy. Also, thanks to our listeners for participating in this conversation. We sure hope we'll
Mhm.
see you next week. Seat stays hot.
Full Reset is a Herself Media production produced by Stephanie McBee. The team includes Austin Channing Brown, Jenny Booth Powder, Brooke Campbell, and Creative Thought Media. Our theme music was composed and performed by Grammy Award winning artist Lecrae.